Call the meeting to order. We'll stand and face the flag. Put your hand over your heart. The pledge of allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Heather, will you take roll call, please?
Commissioner Dibdall,
Here.
Commissioner Corbin.
Here.
Commissioner Wire.
Here.
Commissioner Shaw,
Here.
Mayor Denner.
Here. We have the agenda in front of us. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda? So moved. Second. Any further comments or discussion? Hearing or seeing any, all in favor, signify by aye. Aye. All opposed, motion carried. We have nothing under appearances and acknowledgement. We'll move into the consent calendar. Do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar? So. Second. All in favor, signify by aye. Aye. All opposed, motion carried. Move into unfinished business. Item number 1, discuss and approve restructuring of engineering department and remove job posting.
Sure. The commission had discussed at previous meetings what we wanted to do with the advertisement for the city engineer position. I had put together a memo after receiving feedback from everybody as well as working with current staff. Looking at the memo in front of me, I see that I accidentally left a blank in there. I believe it's supposed to say June of 21. It was about when we started advertising for that position. After not receiving a lot of applicants or being successful in hiring an applicant, we've also learned that many other cities are struggling to find city engineer positions, and it's the same in the engineering firm world as well. So based on feedback from commission as well as working with staff, I believe there's a good way to restructure using our existing staff to have a department that can be staffed without a professional engineer, a PE on staff. And that memo kind of outlines what that looks like. Our recommendation would be to have a director of engineering and community development. We believe that our existing staff, the former Ryan Haig, would be an excellent person to fill that position. He's largely been leading that department for many months now, and I think everybody's been very pleased with his performance in that area. We would maintain our existing engineering technician, and we are currently advertising for the building official code enforcement officer. And then staff recommendation is also to look at hiring an administrative assistant to assist with that department. This would be somebody that would be the face, the first person you'd see when you walk into the department. Somebody's gonna be there day to day as Ryan and Dan and others are coming and going. Today was a good example. We only had 2 staff. They both needed some time off. And so they were off today, and we had people stopping in wondering where the engineers were at. And that administrative assistant would be somebody that could help to fill that office more permanently as they're coming and going. I think that's the gist of what we're recommending. We would also need to look to contract with an engineering firm to provide that engineering services as a city engineer. That's something that we don't have to approve tonight. Tonight, I'm looking to just make sure that we can flush out this conversation, answer any questions that may be had by the commission or the public. And then next week for our meeting on November 22nd, we're going to have our personnel resolution, which needs to be approved by next week. And so these changes would be reflected in that resolution. But since it is pretty substantial restructure, we wanted to give time in advance to discuss. Stand by for any questions.
So would Ryan be doing similar things as he's doing now, just formalizing that he'd be the director?
In many ways, Ryan really exceeds and excels in areas of construction administration. Is one that sticks out. He'd also be able to continue working with Dan to design smaller street improvement projects that don't need that PE to stamp for approval. And then more formally, he'd be recognized as the manager of that department, overseeing staff, directing their work, supervising them, and making sure that the department is working efficiently.
Do we have smaller street projects that don't require a stamp?
Yep. Yeah. Each year, we found for the last decade or so, there's been 1 to 2 projects that are smaller that our staff do design and develop in-house. And in the past, we've had the PE on staff, but based on what we've learned throughout the last several months, we don't believe that we would need to have that PE on staff to implement those projects. For larger projects, especially ones that require financing from USDA or others, they do require professionally engineered designs. But for these smaller street improvement projects, wouldn't be necessary.
Ryan's background, FEMA as well, does he not?
Yes, yeah, he's been the floodplain administrator, building official for quite some time. Obviously looking to move him into this more management role.
I think he would be a very good leader in that department.
How many staff then?
It'd be 4 total. If the administrative assistant is something that the commission would like to see us move forward with. I believe one thing I neglected to say was that that position would also allow our managers as well as our technicians to focus more on the technical work that is required of them and allow the administrative assistant to help with paperwork, with customer relations, and with some of the day-to-day operations that either our engineering department is already conducting or possibly some personnel in the finance office is helping with. And this person will be able to consolidate that together and allow them to continue focusing on the more technical nature of their jobs.
Remind me, Jameson, how many applicants have we had since June?
2. Yes.
So you need a motion to restructure.
I think that would be fair so that we have clear direction from the commission moving forward. And then that the details will be finalized in the resolution next week.
I'm going to make a motion to approve the restructure of the engineering department per your recommendations.
Do you need it? Are we dropping the posting?
And remove job.
And remove the job posting.
Okay, is that over?
Yeah, I'll second that motion.
Is there any further comments or discussion? Not hearing any, all in favor, signify by aye. All opposed? Motion carried. Under new business, item number 1, discuss an action to approve advertising a contract for part-time animal control duties.
Little background on this item. So we have an animal control officer who is on call throughout the week, and that's the majority of his duties. He also takes care of many weekends, but as you can imagine, one person can't be on call 24/7, 365. So we have had a part-time animal control employee in the past who can take, I'd say roughly every other weekend and in other times as needed, so that our animal control officer doesn't have to be here all the time. It has become more difficult to find somebody to fill that position long-term. We do have somebody who's doing it now, but I don't believe he intends to do it forever either. So we are looking at other options. We do know that there are existing staff and employees within the city that'd be interested in helping out with some of those weekends. The difficulty with that is, and if you simply added on to their current job duties or hours, they'd be paid overtime on all the hours that they'd be cleaning up kennels and responding to animal control calls on those select weekends. That money and everything would be coming out of the overtime would be affecting the department which they're in. So another way of structuring that is to have a simple contract so that we can essentially put a contract out for bid, and anybody interested in that contract can apply, and we can interview and select from there. And they would have a flat amount. It wouldn't be hourly. My recommendation we had to be $25 a day for cleaning other duties at the facility, and then $25 per call. That does line up with on the call side for select calls when if somebody's dog needs to be collected by their owner, there is a fee for that. It's $25. We just pass along what we're charged when that's happened. And in the past, sometimes we've had a kenneling service that we've lined up with when our animal control officer isn't available, and they've charged us $25 a day for those services. So there's some backing in where that number comes from. I think that's everything that I have. I'll stand by for any questions.
So the part-time city employee would be paid hourly in addition to the per call basis.
based on the contract, they would just be paid a flat rate to be separate and wouldn't affect their current job duties or hours. So they could still do their 40 hours a week in other departments, and then this would be something that'd be separate from their typical employment.
Like a side hustle.
Right.
I like it.
You should put that on the agenda. We would have gotten there quicker.
You word it that way.
Side hustle, yeah.
I think it's the right way to go.
I'll make a motion to approve advertising a contract for part-time animal control duties.
I'll second it.
Any further comments or discussion?
Is there any additional education they need for this type of role or?
Not that I'm aware of. Just curious, trying to go
Are
ahead.
they, can they shoot animals in town?
If they need to protect themselves, then yes.
If it was coming right at me.
When you say that, it concerns me a little, I'm not gonna lie.
Answer the question.
If your life is in peril, then yes.
And I get to decide if my life's in peril.
Well, it would be reviewed.
Good answer. Thank you.
To my knowledge, that has not happened while I've been here.
Maybe you can get a body camera too.
Probably need one.
Any other comments or discussion? Not hearing any. All in favor, signify by aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. Item 2, Brad, to discuss an action to approve Madison Aquatic Center improvement.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members of the commission, you should have in front of you a letter from Amert Construction. We opened bids last Wednesday, and we had one bid, and that was from Amert Construction. Pursuant to South Dakota law, that allows us to negotiate, work out a deal with the lowest only bidder. And in this case, we looked at some options to try to reduce the cost of the building. In the first preliminary discussions with the contractor, the masonry block, the burnished block, the smooth shiny block that's on the side of the aquatic center was a little more expensive. So I said, well, what can we get for deduct on that? And you can see that's the 15,400. And then if we just remove the storage building in total, what could we do? And that would be the 96,568, leaving a remaining total of $97,432.
And that's to fix.
To reconfigure the chemical rooms, fix the ventilation, that type of stuff. Reduce, there's finishes inside there, like door handles, door locks, that type of stuff's got to be all replaced.
So we have doors entering the chemical rooms from outside instead of inside.
Just the chlorine room. The issue we run into is with the muriatic acid room is you have to have an eye wash station within so many feet of the door, and we can't have that outside. And you can't have the eye wash station inside the room. So it kind of leaves you with having to leave that one going into the current room. But that one isn't the life safety hazard that the chlorine is. The way that pool is designed, they have a sump, but it's big. I mean, it's, 10 foot deep and 20 feet by 16 feet or something like that. And that's where all the pumps sit down in the sump. Currently, the chlorine room doors open into that, and chlorine being 2.5 times heavier than air. If somebody were to be down in the sump, chlorine comes rushing out, you kill them. There'd be no way for them to get out. And that changes that area into what's called a confined space, and you have to have confined space entry and all these different things that go into it. The safest way to do it is configure the building so that there's no way chlorine can get into that space outside of an act of God or something like that. But, under normal operating circumstances, you open up that door, the chlorine goes to the outside. There's no issue. The people going in there will have their PPE on to protect themselves. So there shouldn't be any issue with that. It disperses readily. So it's not like it's a big threat outdoors, but indoors where it can concentrate is an issue. So that's the safety issue we're trying to fix.
How big a storage room is the building is that?
It was roughly 30 by 30.
I know, originally, because we switched the pool over to all chlorine or all liquid based now.
It was, yeah, it was in
There's no granular
pellets
anymore.
and now it's in liquid.
Because I think originally I was thinking when we were gonna build that shed, we were just gonna store the granular stuff outside. If we've moved away from a granular where they're in a plastic containment bottle, things like that, I'm not necessarily in favor of the shed at this point. I think we need to fix the building personally.
There's a lot of other things that are in the pump house that don't need to be in the pump house. That was part of the other reasoning for this. There's a lot of different various chemicals and a lot of stuff that really shouldn't be in there. When the pool's not operating, it's maybe not such a bad idea to put stuff in there, but the problem is if you gotta maintain something, work on it, you're moving stuff all the time and it's just a trip hazard. It's not the way you run a facility. I mean, let me put it this way. If we brought Rick from the water treatment plant up there and showed it to him, he'd probably freak out because his plant is neat, clean, tidy, everything's put away. There's no stuff, trip hazards, anything like that laying around. So it's not the way that we would normally operate a facility like this. The concern is that in the summertime, and I haven't been there, don't know how it's operated, that some of that stuff stays in there and it's still a trip hazard, still a hazard inside the building as far as junkiness, if you will. So that's the kind of concern long-term, is that I think we do need to have a storage plan for that stuff. This was looking at it to be convenient. We did look at a sympathetic construction, and that's part of why this was, fairly high, it was a brick masonry type building. But, roughly, $1,000 a square foot is high even for that type of building this time, around. So we'll have to look at other options maybe in the future or whatever. We don't have, in my mind, we don't have a lot of choice on the other part. That nothing says we have to award this. But I think that leaves us with some issues on a liability standpoint in the future, especially with that. So
I don't disagree with you, Adam. I think we need to fix the chemical room for the 97, but for the storage, I mean, we could look at, for 96,000, we could look at maybe a couple sheds. I mean, they're nice sheds. Nothing saying it has to look exactly like the building.
Even if we tabled the shed itself and just maybe, call Brookings and call Watertown and some of these other towns and ask them how maybe they're storing their chemicals outside of that. But right now, in my opinion, I think we need to get the building fixed. I think that needs to be done. So it's done right and we fixed that pool 110% above where it should be. The storage shed is just an additional bonus if we could have done it. But I agree,
right now with the price of
$1,000 square foot
materials,
is
and,
ridiculous.
yeah,
So what is that 97,000? You mentioned redoing the doors. You have an itemized bid list or
it was just a lump sum bid.
But
bill of
that,
material?
It was just lump sum bid. So
Yeah, we can't break down the cost of what that bid includes. Brad could probably go into more details of what the reconfiguration is.
Right.
But we don't have a breakdown of the cost from the bidder.
Don't do it, come back in March and decide we're gonna do it, could be $110,000 real fast. We just don't know. I think that's the hard part.
and I would say there's probably an element of risk on the bidder's part, because getting materials right now is not 100% certain in the building trades. And should they run into a problem getting materials, there is a liquidated damages penalty on this if we're go past, I think it's May 15th, so it has to be complete operational, everything done by that time frame, and if it's not there, there's liquidated damages. So It's-
What are the risks of starting this project and not opening doors? I mean,
you mean not opening the
the
pool?
pool, yes.
That's a good question. I wish I knew, because if I did, I'd play the lottery and win. I can't tell you what's gonna happen next week. I mean, you start shutting down more oil pipelines, you start creating more issues down the line as far as, constricting supply. It could be a big risk, but I don't know the answer to that. I mean, it's just impossible to know right now.
And quick, I just say to clarify it, 'cause I'm not sure I understood the question for sure, but these improvements aren't needed to open the pool.
Right.
But if we start this project, will that
There's no. yeah.
put us in
Question.
jeopardy?
Okay.
That's what I'm
Of
asking.
opening the pool when it's supposed to.
Yeah.
Sure. Like, hopefully they don't start cutting holes in the building until they have the material, the door, whatnot.
The doors, I don't think are probably the issue. It's, you know, maybe some of the ventilation stuff, motors, that type of stuff that might be more of an issue,
I
but
guess I'm hopeful we could communicate that to the contractor. Certainly, we don't want to get ourselves in a jam where we can't operate this thing.
When would they start this, Brad? Do you
they,
know?
my understanding is they could start relatively quick as soon as they got materials.
I guess I would like to better understand, I understand that we have a sump pool, but I'm assuming other aquatic centers have something similar. So what are other aquatic centers doing to mitigate this risk of chlorine being down there?
I think many facilities are built differently from the beginning. And I do not, none of us were here, of course, when this one was originally built, so I'm not sure what their thinking was. And unfortunately, the company that built the pool, from my understanding, is defunct, no longer in business. But from my understanding, other pools are built to mitigate these concerns from the get-go.
I feel like on water systems, having the chlorine room entrance into the main structure is very rare.
Most of them are in the exterior access.
Now, for this reason, if it leaks, I'd rather have it go outside.
I mean, even in the simple little water treatment facility, which was just fluorosilicic acid and chlorine in Fort Pierre, there was a separate door and a separate room for the chlorine. And it was kept separate from the little fluorosilicic acid room. So it was, I mean, it's pretty common to separate them out and have an exterior door going out to them. I've been talking with the mechanical engineer that worked on these. He's done 150 pools and he said, I've never done one with the doors opening into the pool area. So that was his, you don't do that. He says, you just don't ever mix the two. So that was his comments, but I have not gone to other facilities and looked at them. I have no idea what they do.
So besides a motor breakdown, what would make you or a line break? What reason would any employee have to go down to that sump hole? Is there somewhere we can?
Change out.
They got to change
filters.
out the filters,
Is there
trash
filters
screens.
under there?
There's
Yeah.
trash screens down in there. They got to do about in fall of the year, they got to do about every other day.
Right, so why couldn't we put it under lock and key and then have it be tested? Or, you have to test in order to enter type of thing.
Because you have to go in there to run the pool. I mean, that has all the mechanicals in there. I mean,
Right, but you won't be down below is what I'm saying.
no, you won't be down below. Right.
We can go through a confined space entry protocol. You're gonna have to train everybody every year because it's gonna be a whole new crew every year. And have to have a testing kit and have to have the reagents to verify your testing kit's working, so it can be done. It's not impossible. And
I guess I envisioned it to be more visual as open grates, open steel, where I don't know that confined space testing would be necessary, but
the only reason it's there is because the chlorine is heavier than the air. You can't see it. You can't know it's there. And if somebody opens the door, it can rush in there. And right now, the way it is, if there was a gas buildup in there and you open it up for whatever reason and the chlorine rushes out, you could trap somebody down there. So the only reason it becomes a confined space is it's wide open. And it's not obvious it's confined space until you consider the chlorine risk. And then it becomes a confined space. And talking with some people, they say, yeah, that's definitely considered confined space because of that. So you've got to do the confined space entry where you go through the protocols of having more than one person, having, the way to get them out of there. So you'd have to have a lift and you'd have to have a tester. I mean, that's just the same as like a manhole. It can be done. It's not that it can't be done. It's what's the right answer. That's up for discussion. And that's up for you guys to decide. And I'll do whatever you want. I don't have a strong burning desire to spend this much money on these kinds of renovations, but I don't know, I don't have a better option for you right now, and I wish I did. It's.
I just look at the liability of it. It's saying, oh, it's $97,000, but if somebody were to lose their life, I would feel pretty terrible. What if we didn't do it right?
Do we know what we have left in the operating budget for this year?
I did not know that.
As far as I know, it's more or less intact.
So what?
The,
what was it?
we got 85,000 from the insurance company to do the repairs, and I think we've gone through about 98, something like that. So we took 13 out of the 110, so there's 97-ish left, about what this is.
And that's where we would take it. To do
Yes,
that.
the city would have funds available. One way or another, we could talk with our finance staff on that. I think also maybe part of this conversation is probably a more important piece is that our intent as staff is also to develop a job description for facilities or a building maintenance position, and that person would have responsibility over this facility. It's not just the processes and procedures or the physical infrastructure, but it's also the individual who would be responsible for overseeing this mechanical side of the pool. So that person would be there day to day, checking on things, doing a lot of those maintenance repairs that in the past has been done by a myriad of persons.
It'd be good to have consistency. You know, pools, all that mechanical stuff with chemicals and everything, you gotta be consistent. You get, you know, too many cooks spoil the stew, and that's kind of what happens a lot of times in pools. Somebody tests it and they don't test it right. Now we don't have enough chlorine, and they go and jack up the chlorine or try to shock it, and then you got too much chlorine. And been through that multiple times, that you know, it's all about the proper training and proper use of all the testing equipment, so.
I'll make a motion that we accept the alternative bid number 2 without the storage building at the $97,432.
You want a funding source identified, or we got that figured out?
It's not necessary, but it's not, you certainly are able to as well.
Sounds like we don't need it.
Was there a second?
So
Before we move to discussion, was there a second on that? Maybe I missed it.
Second?
Okay, sorry to interrupt.
who professionally decided this is the route we need to go? Or, I mean, do we have somebody that specializes in water treatment that's looked at this, that they're telling us this is the,
I probably, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
no, go ahead, I just haven't.
I'd probably looked at an individual that Brad was speaking to who's been with, he said, however many different pools. As a
He's
resource.
built 150 some facilities, mostly motels, that type of stuff. And he agreed that was the way it should be done. It's just my experience, having worked in the water industry for 20 years and, you know, 20 plus years and everything, and been through the confined space training, all that stuff that's, you know, in the career that I've had. I wouldn't do it this way. I mean, just common sense. It's not something that you have to have a stamp to figure out. It's just common sense. Chlorine's heavy in air. You got a door that opens into that. Bad deal. I mean, it's a significant hazard. I mean, they used chlorine gas in World War I because people are in trenches. And that was the best way to get the people out of the trenches, was to gas them and kill them. So that's why they did that. And that's it. You just, you know, go back and look at history. It's pretty obvious how deadly it is. So.
One other question, Brad, is I know that door is gonna be right over by a transformer. Are we gonna have to move that transformer?
No, there's enough room.
There's enough room.
Yeah, we'll be all right.
Will the current door stay there?
No, it'll be blocked in. We'll, yeah, we'll just,
So we won't have to worry about it.
then there's gonna be, you know, new ventilation system, and then there's gonna be an additional new vent that goes down into the sump and pulls the air off the bottom of the sump to try to keep any chlorine that does get in there from the water, whatever. There's a couple other things we can do to try to keep the chlorine, because just the chlorine itself in that room is part of what did the oxidization. The combination of the two was really bad, but the chlorine had done a lot of damage in there just on its own. But there's two places where we dump water that's got chlorine in it, that's open to the air and it splashes and you know, kind of fouls the air. So I think there's some options there after watching the pool operate, that we can do some things that will help keep that from being an issue. There are places where we have an air brake, which you gotta have from kind of the way it was set up. But we might be able to protect them better with some sort of glass or something and still have an air brake and not have it be so easy to spill out. Because the one runs the whole time the pool's running. And it's hitting in this little bucket and it's kind of spraying out where it's at. And it's just something that could be pretty easily fixed. And that would help. Even with this fix, there's some things I think we can do to make it better so there's not as much chlorine fouling.
Really hope after we fix this, we don't have to deal with this again. It's been a long 2-year journey.
It has. It's not over quite yet.
I
I-
really hope that pool opens on time. 'Cause I really don't want to deal with the backlash again. Just thinking.
From our knowledge at this point in time, there's nothing that would prevent us from opening that time.
As long as we get this work done.
Employees.
uh,
That's an issue we would have every year.
Yeah. Any further comments or discussion? Not hearing any. All in favor, signify by aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. Albert, did you put out a public comment?
Yes, there is none.
Any announcements? Not hearing any announcements, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. All in favor, signify by aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Have a nice evening.
Yeah, thanks, Brad.
Thank you, Brenda.
It's been fun.